This is a book review on the book Poorly Made in China, and it's easier for me to do this in audio than type all this out, so I'm just going to do it this way as a video. Um, that book is a real page turner, I'll tell you that much. It's real informative about what the psychology of manufacturers are in China. It's fascinating. Um, you can really see what the problems with China are. I mean, basically, they lure you in with really good customer service at first because they want to get your business. So, I mean, they'll pamper you like nothing else at first, to bring you in their doors. But, and a lot of these guys are just getting started and you don't know that. So, basically, once they do actually get your orders going, get everything figured out, and, quote you that low price that you want and everything else, well, they start basically doing what they call quality fade, start reducing the quality of your product, making parts thinner than they should be, out of different materials than you'd want them to, not filling your orders properly or building things properly, etc. So, basically they have this philosophy too of saving face where nothing's ever their fault. Nothing's ever their fault. Um, it's always somebody else's fault, and usually they all blame it on you, as the importer. And it's all because of this saving face thing that they're all like addicted to. Well, they need to throw that out. That's what's holding them back. That's what's putting them into the dark ages right there. It is just the absolute wrong attitude. You need to own up to your responsibilities. They need to take responsibility for their actions, and they don't. They really do believe it's their right to make changes to a product and not tell you about it. Not tell you they're changing specifications of what they're building for you, and that'll happen again. The first couple of orders or so, they'll do really well. But then when they think you're not looking, they'll start making changes. It's little minor changes, to pinch a few pennies here and there, and it's wrong. And the fact of the matter is, you would say, well, maybe, you could actually negotiate a cheap price with China. Like let's say you have some gadget and they tell you, again, they want your business, so they tell you, oh, we'll do it for $1.50 a piece. And you're like, thrilled because it cost you like $15 in the United States to have that made or something like that. Well, the fact of the matter is, if they tell you that, you could say, well, okay, so that's your volume price, that's your bottom dollar, huh? $1.50. Well, let's make it $2. In other words, bargain up with them. Well, the thing is that if you do that, that still doesn't mean they're not going to conduct shenanigans, because there are no consequences to them. They don't have to worry about breach of contract lawsuits or anything like that, and enjoy trying to get the factory to redo the order for free. And the fact of the matter is, they all want to get paid in advance. So at the end of the damn day, you're not going to be able to hold them accountable and enjoy trying to sue China. You're not just a company in China, you're really talking about trying to sue the country of China. Frankly, who are they going to support? In some kind of lawsuit. You're just not going to get away with it, and mostly that never happens anyway, because it's usually really hard setting up a relationship with a vendor in China. And they know that. They know they got you over a barrel, that you're going to be really reluctant after you become dependent on them, to take your business elsewhere, because they know you're going to have a hard time setting that up. So to them, it's a calculated risk, and they'll try to get away with it every chance they can. And it's something you can never get away with in the West. And the reason is, like if you are in the United States and you're doing business with a U.S. manufacturer, you can always take your business elsewhere. Even if you didn't have to worry as a United States manufacturer about breach of contract lawsuits, and having to own up to your responsibility and redo the order before you get paid because you're on credit terms or whatever, even if you didn't have to worry about that, you would still have to worry about them walking, and taking their business elsewhere. So you wouldn't generally want that to happen. But then again, U.S. manufacturers know, not to undercharge for their stuff generally, and you don't get that in China, because so many of these guys are actually, you may contact somebody over the internet or whatever, or even if you travel to China, you may be dealing with somebody that's actually never manufactured what you're trying to manufacture before. You just don't know. You don't know what the real experience is, and boy, even if you travel over there, they could put on quite a show for you. In other words, make you think they're more experienced than they are, with an impressive showroom or whatever. These guys know how to play games with people, and that's what they do. They're very, very unscrupulous. I mean, it's a lot like America was. Same kind of attitude, that America had. They don't understand what quality is either. But same kind of attitude America had, several hundred years ago. But the thing is that, to Chinese, quality doesn't mean anything. They're more concerned about being wasteful than anything else, and that's a notion they got to get out of their head too. Because they need to manufacture things to specifications. If they make changes, they need to get your permission first, but they don't do that. But they do not know what quality means, really, and why it's important. And that's a big problem I have with China. They just don't understand that quality is an important thing that they need to address, because they don't understand what problems that causes us down the line when we get a bunch of junk from China and we're trying to get it in a retail store or whatever, and we get saddled with it. Well, that's like biting them not putting out high quality, the quality we bargain for when we negotiate a relationship with a Chinese manufacturer. By them not doing that, they're basically biting the hand that's feeding them. We're the ones giving you the business. We're the ones that got the business. We are actually superior, in that hierarchy. You're the service or contract manufacturer, and since you're a contract manufacturer, dude, the customer is always right, because you're building something to our specification that we're bringing to you. And they just don't get that. They actually think of it the other way around, that because they're the manufacturer, they're superior because they're the ones making the product. Well, no, it's not that way at all. You're not the only one in the world that can do that, and that's what they don't understand right now, is they're not the only one in the world that can do that, but it's still very difficult for Westerners to take their business elsewhere over there. And they know that, so they don't mind trying to press their luck a little bit, because they know the probability is not very high they're going to lose business over it. And they know they're not going to get sued, so they don't really have much to worry about. And there's just almost no consequences to their shenanigans. And so at the end of the day, it just occurs to me after reading that book that there's only really one logical way to actually deal with China, and that's that if you want to do business with somebody in China, you need to set up relationships with more than just one vendor over there. At least 3, preferably 5. And if you do 5, make sure at least one of those is like in Taiwan or hell, even Cambodia or definitely Korea or someplace. It's definitely going to have higher quality and cost you more, but the difference is that, particularly the ones that you set up in China, and if you do just 3, set them all up in China, just make sure they're nowhere near each other, if at all possible. And you may have to contact some, foreign nationals, like I'd want to try to contact somebody from the United States, like the author of the book, for example, who's kind of in the business of doing this sort of thing. But contact him and say, hey, we want to set up, with 3 different companies. They're nowhere near each other. They're never going to, discover who each other are. And what you do is you give, like, 2 out of those 3 companies only 5% of your business, and give the third company 90% of your business. In the case where you set up 3 of them, for example. Now, by doing that, you tell all 3 of those companies, you tell the company you're giving 90% of your business with, hey, look, we're watching you, and guess what? We have set up relationships with 2 other companies. You are getting 90% of the business. They're getting 5% each. Now, we give them 5% each, and it costs us more because you're going to pay a higher unit price for whatever it is you're producing, and higher shipping costs. Although there's a possible solution to that I'll cover in a second. But you'll at least pay slightly higher prices because you're doing much smaller volumes, and Chinese factories like the volumes, but you give them just enough to where they'll do business with you, those other 2 factories. But what you tell them is that, hey, you tell the small guys, you say, hey, we're giving you 5% of the business. There are 3 companies in here in China that we're doing business with. You're one of them. We're only giving you 5%, and we're giving one of the others only 5%, but the third one we're giving 90%. Now, when they mess up, when they don't do our product like we're telling them to do it, they don't live up to the quality, they don't keep their word, they don't keep their end of the bargain and they start providing us inferior quality stuff, we will immediately take our business and give it to one of you guys. So even though we're giving you guys a smaller percentage of the volume, you know that other company will eventually mess up. That's how you guys work. So, eventually one of you two guys will get the business, but it will depend on who is the lowest bidder between the two of you. So you don't in other words, from the small companies, you don't have to take bids, and it's not even a good idea to take bids right now. From the two smaller ones, don't take bids on the high volume price. Don't even ask them how much they do a high volume lot of this stuff for. Don't even ask them that. The two small ones right off the bat. Just get them to quote you the low volume price, which is going to be higher. But you can just tell them that, hey, if you keep impressing us, and keep your quality up and doing things exactly like we ask you to do, you could be in the running for getting the other 90% later on. And then what we'll do is, when that third factory messes up, we'll cut them down to 5% and give you 90% if you come in at the lowest price between the remaining two of you. And we'll put them on probation. And then when you mess up, we're going to give the other two guys the opportunity to bid against each other on the business again. So that assumes that first factory has gotten their act together. If they hadn't gotten their act together yet, well, then we'll find a fourth manufacturer and just cut them out completely. If they don't get their act together, we'll put that company that started with 90% on probation, by knocking them down to 5%. If they don't get their, and we'll pay them a slightly higher price for it, when we do, and you do, you pay them a higher price for the smaller volume, that's fine. But if they ever want to have a chance of getting that business back, boy, they better shape up. But that's the only way to do it, is kind of a round robin kind of way. You start by giving one of three 90% of your business and the other two only 5%, and then when that first one messes up, you give that 90% to the next guy, and then round and round in circles until eventually prices buoy up, because it's going to cost you more ultimately doing it this way, because their prices are going to be higher, but they at least know there's a consequence, because none of them are going to want to lose the business once they have it. Once they have that 90% instead of 5%, none of them are going to want to lose it. That gives them an incentive to not play games like that. So chances are much better that you're not going to even have the first manufacturer mess up that way. But they still might, because they will probably underquote, not just, they'll probably underquote themselves. Quote you a price that's just too low for them to actually do it. But since they're relatively inexperienced, or they're just playing games to get your business, and are experienced, then there's going to be shenanigans. But this way you can kind of keep it under control. But just be above board on this whole thing from the get-go. That's the best way, because I'll tell you one thing you don't want. You do want low prices, but you do not want a big batch of defective products coming your way. And this is the only way to deal with it. Yeah, you're going to pay higher prices, but you're going to get better quality this way. It's the only logical way I can come up with to do business in China. Because otherwise, even if you pay more, and that's what I was talking about earlier, is that even if you pay more initially, by overbidding them, taking their lowest offer and adding like 25% to it or something, they're still going to probably mess around, because there's no incentive for them not to. They don't have to worry about losing your business. You need to introduce that fear into it. They don't have the fear that Western companies have of losing a customer's business. They don't even think that far ahead. They don't understand the consequences of their actions, because they don't really understand us or our economy or how any of this stuff works. And because of that, that's why this crap keeps happening. The only way the only way you can get around it is kind of like I'm suggesting. And earlier I said, even though you're doing business with three companies, you may pay higher shipping on the other two because they're only getting 5%. Well, if you could make contact with like a foreign national, like for example, if I had, like the author of the book, if the author of the book was willing to actually handle shipping logistics for you, or if you could find somebody that was, well, what they could do is they could actually, manage the shipping from these three different companies that are spread out all over China, and have them come to one port and warehouse them in the meantime, then ship them all at once. That could actually save you on shipping. However, you'll pay that guy more, so, because you'd have to pay an intermediary to handle shipping logistics, but it could end up being a lower cost. Anyway, that's just a theory. But at the end of the day, this may not be a very attractive option, because it's certainly going to cost you more to do business in China than you might like. But at the end of the day, and even not just the long run, but in the intermediate run, you're going to be way better off, than you or any of your competitors might be, because you're not going to be dealing with these same shenanigans. You'll have a higher quality standard come out of China, and eventually, if enough people did this kind of thing, you'd see China finally reform. And yeah, you'd see their prices go up, which they honestly should anyway. It's just kind of ridiculous they're over there, scraping by like they are, which is part of the incentive they have to be like that. But at the end of the day, a lot of it's just because of lack of experience and lack of consequence. That's the problem. They need to be introduced to the idea of consequence. They're more afraid, of actually the real possibility of losing your business than they are, about saving a few pennies and trying to play games with you, which is all you're going to get from what I'm understanding here from most of these guys over there. And I'm sure there are some factories in China that maybe don't do this, but the fact of the matter is there's still just no real incentive for most of them not to. And for the vast majority of you guys, trying to find the cheapest price, you're going to be doing business with somebody that thinks like this. It's practically guaranteed. And even though I've read some of the other reviewers saying, hey, China's changed a lot since this book, was written even in the last 5 years or whatever, the fact of the matter is, though, is that I guarantee you this kind of attitude doesn't change overnight at all. Because there's still, I guarantee you, is no consequence for them to, to play games. There's no consequence for it. And that concept needs to be introduced to them, that there are consequences to playing games and doing these shenanigans. And once you see that happening, then they'll start to understand why quality is important. And that's the only way that's ever going to change over there. And it will mean higher prices, but that's a good thing. That's what this whole free trade crap was supposed to be about, isn't it? About bringing China out of the dark ages so they're less of a threat to us. That really was the whole reason that I understood behind free trade. And this whole thing with China is that it makes them less of a threat, less of a potential enemy. But I don't think that's worked out too terribly well. But maybe it has in some ways, but maybe not in others. But the fact of the matter is, anyway, to me, that's just what I took from this book. It's a worthwhile read. It was very eye-opening. So anyway,